Hello, everybody. I'm Brene Myers, and I am so glad that you joined us because we're going to have a really wonderful conversation with my colleague, long-term colleague, and friend, Manar Morales, and her new book, The Flexibility Paradigm. So welcome, welcome, Manar.
Here with you. Hello, how are you?
I am thrilled to talk to you. And I just want to say congratulations, because
Thank
I'm
you.
sure this was a book that you've been thinking about writing for a very long time. For those of you who don't know Manar as well as I do, she is the founder and the CEO of the Diversity and Flexibility Alliance. And you've been in that role for how long?
I know, under the Alliance since 2012. So
Yes.
long
So
history with the topic before that.
yes, thank you. And Manar and I have, wow, how long have we known each other, do you
I
think?
know. I was trying to remember. I feel like maybe 2008. I'm trying a long time. We'll say. I think I remember meeting you went about a NALP conference or something.
That's probably right. And here's the one thing that I want everyone to know about you, Manar. You have been an incredible supporter of mine. You have given me so much advice and really rooted for me in everything I've done and just given me so much encouragement. So I'm just so grateful to have an opportunity to be here with you and to share your brilliance with so many people. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, though, I love the way that all of us support each other, right? I think it's so important to show up for people in your life. You do that. I like to do that for you, but you certainly have done that for me. So thank you.
Thank you. So tell us about the flexibility paradigm. I mean, we don't have all day,
Yes.
but I want you to just tell us like three really important concepts that you hope people are going to grab when they pick up this book.
Yeah, the book is really meant to be a roadmap. It's not meant to say you have to do it this way and that there's only one way. It's really meant to be a roadmap for organizations and leaders to discover what their own path around flexibility is. And I think if I think about three important concepts, overarching concepts, would be that in order for flexibility to work, you have to be intentional, you have to be inclusive, and you have to be iterative. And we can kind of break down each of those concepts as it relates to the book. But really, that idea, that flexibility fundamentally is a culture change and not a policy change, really kind of sets the tone for the entire book.
When you say flexibility, what do you mean? Because I know there are lots of preconceived notions about what we mean when we say flexibility.
Yeah, so I talk about the idea of for me, it's really around holistic flexibility. So this idea that it's not one size fits all. And yes, COVID gave us a grand experiment with virtual work, and that's been hybrid is all the buzz and always in the news, and everybody's talking about hybrid. But that's really just one form of flexibility. I think long before when I was doing this work, I was doing a lot of work around reduced hours, and even is that possible, especially in professional services organizations and firms that tend to have high client demands. So things like when you think about flexibility, I think it's not just in where you work, but it's in how you work, it's in how long you're working, it's flexibility of time, it's flexibility of place, it's flexibility of schedule. And all of those things are things that organizations should be considering today when they think about flexibility.
I like a lot of things about the book, but the part that really kind of, you and I are in this same space of this idea of humanizing
Yeah.
the workplace and actually having people, employees, humans in the
Yeah.
center of how we're thinking about things. Can you tell me more about, and then this holistic idea you also bring. So can you tell me more about what you mean when you say humanizing?
Yeah. And I went kind of in chapter 10, really in depth in like, what's the next evolution that we think about and how do we create these human centered organizations? But really, what I think COVID did, I say that the way that 9/11 forever changed how we travel, COVID will forever change how we work. But it didn't just change how we work. I think it changed people's expectations from work. And for the first time, right, we as employers and employers in general had to see people as humans, right? They had to think about what was happening in their lives. They couldn't unsee it, right? Because it impacted not only people's lives, but it impacted the workplace. And I think that part of what I wanted to do in the book is I thought, we're going to go on a forgetting curve after all this is done. And everybody gets to go back in the way in which they want to go back. And suddenly organizations have a choice. I was concerned about the forgetting curve that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And how do we hold on to that idea that in order for workplaces to thrive, we do need to be people first? Because if we take care of our people will take care of our teams, and our teams will take care of our clients or our product or whatever organization that you work in. And so I don't know how organizations can survive without looking at their people as something that helps them continue to thrive.
Yeah. I definitely think, like, when COVID happened, I was the VP of inclusion strategy for Netflix, and I definitely learned a lot. And I also saw people forgetting what we learned. But I am always trying to hold on to the fact that we got stuff done. And we also were able to be thoughtful and compassionate and flexible. But I know, and you say this in the book, that there are at least 5 C's, you call them the
Yeah.
5 C's, right?
Yeah.
Of what leaders are worried about. And I heard this expressed, and I hear it still expressed in lots of different work environments, right? So tell us what
Yeah.
the 5 C's are that kind of prevent people from seeing the wisdom of flexibility, or that at least that they need to try to work through as they figure out how to embrace true flexibility.
Yeah, and I had just done a LinkedIn post recently where I said I wrote a Harvard Business Review article on the myth of the 5 C's before COVID. This was before COVID was ever existence. And I
Yeah.
think they're coming back again today, which is that, I'm worried about loss of contribution. Are my people going to be working? Are they not going to be working? How will I know that everyone's working? That loss of control. We have this false sense of security that if I see somebody in front of me, oh, they must be working. And I would say, they have a computer in front of them that could be doing anything, right? They could be out there doing whatever it is they please to do. You really know that someone's working measured by impact and output, right? What's the output that they're putting out, but also what's the impact that they're having in the organization. It's not just about output, it is about impact as well. Loss of culture is a big one. I know you and I work a lot with organizations right around culture when we think about who do we want to be as an organization, what are our values, what do we stand for. Loss of that connection is a big one. That idea of how are we going to connect? How are we going to think
Yeah.
about the ways that we're connecting, or loss of
Yeah.
collaboration? How are we going to be working together? And the point I've always made is you're right to be worried about those things. Those are absolutely things that can happen in organizations that are not intentional about how they design workplaces so that we have a culture of flexibility that works for everyone. It's not just about working for the individuals, the employees, but it's how does it work for the employer? How does it benefit the business? How does it benefit our clients, our communities that we serve, whomever it is that we serve within the organization? It should absolutely be a two-way street and a benefit. It should be a win-win across the board.
Some of the people that I've heard, they have another C, and it's creativity.
Yep.
And they are concerned that creativity only happens when people are in the same room, even though these might be global companies, by the way.
Yeah.
And clearly, right? There's creativity happening in all sorts of parts of the globe of the company, but somehow there are certain types of work that some folks think don't work as well when we are attempting to be flexible. What would you say
Yeah.
to those people?
And I think that's an excellent point to be making around creativity. And then I say, well, did you ask your people when do they feel the most creative? For some people, they feel the most creative and energized by when they're in the room together and they're all bouncing ideas off of each other. And hey, I get my most creative ideas. You know when my most creative ideas come up? They come up when I'm out in nature walking. Like if I ever really have to work something out in my head, I will go for a walk, and people in the neighborhood probably think that, she look at her on her phone. Really what I'm doing is I'm downloading. I'm like walking and I've got a notes app open and I'm like, oh, my ideas are suddenly flowing. Right?
Yes.
So we all have a different form of like a form in which creativity will come to us. And I think
Yeah.
that's the one size doesn't fit all, which is to say, of course, we can have a time where we say, let's all come together in a room. And there's certainly value to that. But let's not assume that everybody has that same level of creativity in only one environment.
Yes. Oh, someone's asking, um, I think I do the walking too. I have that same situation and I'm just like, whoa. I hope because I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna remember when I get back to the house.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what I hear you talking about is a whole nother skill for a lot of people, which is to lead not according to their own way, but
Yeah.
to be aware that there are lots of other ways that are as productive and as um, and actually makes a lot of contribution. But
Yeah.
so many of us as leaders, me included, um, we often look for people and reward people who are like us and who get inputs the way we get them or work the way we do. And so, what's your advice to leaders about how they actually become more flexible and get the
One
best
is
out of their employees?
two things. And that one is to stay curious, right? Ask questions rather than make assumptions. Ask questions of your team, notice things as a team, come together and say, hey, what is the best ways that we collaborate in person? What's the best ways that we collaborate virtually? If you're just taking virtual work, for example, or hybrid work as that example. But I think the second really important one, and I make the point in the book around certain principles you have to adopt, which is that yes and mindset, that paradox mindset of yes, I can be super creative in this environment and somebody else can be super creative in a different form of environment. And I think something that's true, frankly, today with everything that we're going through is people get stuck in trying to come to common ground. And I keep saying, you don't actually have to come to common ground. You don't have to agree on which is better. We do have to get to higher ground. And how do we get to the higher ground of what is going to work best for all of us? What is going to work best for this environment? How do we collaborate at our best without trying to get into a debate as to which is better? So
Yeah,
that principle, I think, is
interesting.
incredibly important.
Interesting. Yeah, I think in fact the commonality, right, are the core values, are the principles, right? But then how you make that happen for different people in different situations is where the flexibility is needed within ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I do remember COVID really telling me how many assumptions I had been making
Yeah.
about my team, about what they do, about where they live, about what they're, wrestling with, everything. It really did make me understand that curiosity is so powerful and important as a leader. One of the things that I also want to dispel as a myth is who flexibility is for, right? So
Yes.
often people associate flexibility with women and with parents, but you say we need to like deparent, degender, all of that kind of things that were going along with how people perceived flexibility is much broader. So can you tell
Yeah.
us more about that?
So I think it is important that I've been saying this long before COVID. We talked about the idea that for flexibility to work, you had to deparent, degender, and destigmatize it. It could not be just seen as for women. It could not just be seen as for caregivers, but it had to be seen as something that was available to everyone. Interestingly enough, I think what COVID did too is that people who would have never worked on a flexible schedule ever before, who would have never worked from home, suddenly did and said, wait a second, this works for me too. So I would go even a step further now and say, we can't even necessarily divide it along generational lines because it used to be that, oh, this generation wants to work this way. And the research is still very clear that millennials and Gen Xers, they do want to work in a flexible fashion. They do put high demands on flexibility. But what it showed us during COVID was people from baby boomer generations who would have never worked in that way work that way and suddenly really enjoy working that way and don't want to go back. And so
Yes.
making sure you think about 5 generations in the workplace. What are the individual ways that people want to work that we can make possible for us in our organizations?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I was also wondering is, I mean, you've been doing this work for a long time. Like you said, you've been writing articles, you've been hosting an amazing conference. What made you write the book? Like, what was that? And what was that journey like for you?
So it was interesting. Before COVID, I did have an outline for a book, and then COVID completely upended all of that, which is good. I believe in divine timing. So it all worked out well that happened in that way. But I had such a personal journey with flexibility as much as I had a professional journey with it. It really started when I had my first son 23 years ago, 3 boys, and really wanting to work and continue to do the kind of work I was doing. I wanted to continue to be a litigator, but I wanted to do it on a different schedule. And just the journey that I had with that and the ability to find a place that would allow me to not give up litigation that I was passionate about, but also do it on a schedule that I was also passionate about, really kind of opened my eyes to the benefits of flexibility and what it could do, not just for me as an individual, but I also saw what it did for my organization. I also saw what it did for my clients, right? The ability to be there for them in the ways that I could show up for them was really making it work for everyone. And so then fast forward, we had worked under the alliance with members all throughout and really seeing kind of the ways in which if members would implement the structure and working through the decision process really helped them come out to better outcomes. The outcome would be different for each organization. I say it has to fit your culture, right? Every organization is going to be different in the outcomes that they come out of it, but the process worked. So that I really wanted to do. You know this better than anybody around the journey it takes and all the work it takes and the journey of love and frustration, I will say. Maybe just I experienced in writing a book.
Yes.
All that it took. But I appreciated it at the end.
At the end. I agree. I agree. Here's the thing. I know there's some people out who are like out there listening and they're like, yeah, I'm with you. I believe all this. What data do we have to support this? You've got, I know, within the alliance, like really wonderful companies that have really stretched out on this and have really good reports for what they've done flexibly.
Yeah.
But give folks a few data points to help them argue for this in their organizations.
I think there's a lot of data out there around the percentage of, saying that the percentage of people that would leave if you didn't offer flexibility. The Now Foundation does a study that talks about, people who put it in their top 3 of reasons that they would stay when it comes to flexibility or work-life balance kind of tools that they have in place or policies that are put in place. So there's all of that. And then the impact it has on productivity. One of the things I did in the book, and I think it's important for every organization to do, was, yes, I laid out the global business case for flexibility, and it certainly exists. But the thing that I do in the book that I think is most important for organizations is walk through your own business case. Think about how many people would have left your organization or talk about it in exit interviews. Think about when you do engagement surveys, what are your people saying? Do focus groups. Really build your own, because it's so easy, I think, to shoot for people to argue against data that exists out there and says it's forever changing. Oh, that's not our workplace, that's not our culture. Then actually build your own. And one of the chapters in the book walks you really through that process of how do you build your own business case so that leaders have to see what their own people are saying, what their own talent people want.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I often find that when people are arguing against innovation, they're looking at like what they can produce, but they don't look at the cost of not changing. Like they're paying attention to the status quo and what it's doing and the fear that they have that the innovation will cause that status quo to be less, but they're not doing the other side of the equation, which is, yeah, but what does this cost us? Like, how do we actually have a true equation?
I know. And I talk about innovation. I say innovation isn't about recreating the past. Innovation is about reimagining a new future. You can learn lessons from the past in doing that, but it
Yeah.
isn't just about recreating. And one of the things I think that COVID, I used to say that before COVID, our biggest competitor was the status quo. It wasn't about other organizations. It was just about this. I always, right? My biggest competitor was the status quo.
Yeah.
This is the way we've always done it. And that COVID disrupted that status quo because it forced everybody. But you're right that people, one of the things that I think works well in the organizations that I see that continue to work well today, I feel like I've noticed what the difference is. And that's the
Yeah.
difference between adaptive leadership and evolving leadership.
Mm.
Adaptive leadership is I just adapt to the circumstances that I have in front of me. And so we had to adapt, everybody had to adapt to COVID, right? Everybody had to adapt to a new way of thinking. But the organizations or the leaders that I still see today that are sticking with it in ways and are continuing are the ones that actually evolved their thinking about it. I didn't just adapt my practices. I evolved my thinking about what
Mm.
flexibility makes possible. Why is it important? How can we benefit from it? My thinking evolved and changed, and therefore it created change that was more everlasting.
Yeah. So we're in this environment now, and we are seeing so many, really difficult spaces in our work environment, right? Given all that's happening with the new administration. And I'm just wondering, like, where do you think flexibility is going? Is there space for it in this kind of, upside down world we're in right now? Like, how are you thinking about it?
I do think it will continue to endure. I think that every organization will think about what it is that they need, but it goes back to fundamentally who they are and what their values are and how do they think about themselves. I would say before I can tell any organization I meet with what you need to do, I would say you need to figure out who you are first, because what you do has to be in alignment with who you are. What are your values? What's the culture you want to create? Who do you serve? Why do you exist? Where are you headed? What are your strategic priorities? And then what do you stand for? What do you allow for within your organizations? If we can get really clear on that, and we're doing a lot of that culture work with organizations, I say then is what you want to do as it relates to flexibility in alignment with that? Is it in alignment with what do you think it makes possible for you? What do you think it is? It allows the reason I put productivity, profitability, and possibility in the title of the book when we talk about humanizing the workplace, because I do think it's about leaning into, oh, what does it make possible for us? And that idea that it needs to be iterative is we should revisit. We absolutely, right? We could constantly be thinking about how can we do better? How can we do better? But we revisit with the purpose of how can we be better, not how do we just eliminate everything that is happening for us. So
Yeah, thank you.
I'm
And
hopeful. You and I are hopeful, I hope.
I know we are, and I'm so amazed that you got all those words in on the title, like your publisher let you do that. Like,
I know.
because,
I was
but
like,
the
those are
word of
important.
yes, exactly. And possibility speaks to future. And I think that any company and any leader that is focused on the future knows how important flexibility is and how much it enriches your employees' lives. And that's kind of the word I want to end with you and see if you think this is true as well, which is that there is some joy that comes with flexibility, and I'm thinking that that joy is so important to how people show up, their loyalty, their trust, their connection, their productivity. Tell me whether I'm off there
Yeah,
or if that
I
resonates with
know.
you.
I will say there's joy. I will say there's also authenticity about it, right? I can show up and say I have a life. I can show up and say this is a whole part of me, and this is how I am trying to kind of make all of this work. And a level of that I think joy comes from that idea of am I living true to who I want to be and what I say and what my values are, and can I live those values within an organization as well?
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sure we could go on, but we can't right now. But I am so proud of you, and I am so
Thank
grateful for the
you.
work that you've done, and that we now have a lot of it in this book to refer
Thank
to. So thank you, Manar.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being such a light. I have to say, I know that all your listeners here and all the people are familiar with who you are, but you show up. I will say, I love the people who you show up in public in the same way you show up in private. Like that true authenticity of the way that you live your life is always a shining example for me too. So thank you. Thank you for being who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.